Hello and welcome. Tonight, make no mistake, the presidential inauguration will hold as scheduled. Inspector General of Police insists, warns detractors to stop hitting up the polity. Son of Afrobeat legend Seun Kuti now in police custody after turning himself in following an altercation between the singer and a police officer a few days ago. 2 weeks to the end of his tenure, we take a dive into the last 8 years of President Buhari's administration, starting tonight with politics.
Business news tonight. Nigeria's inflation defies MPC's rate hike as it climbs for the fourth consecutive month to 22.22% in the month of April, the highest level in 18 years, according to latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics.
On sports news tonight, Spanish League champions Barcelona celebrate the success of their men's and women's teams with a parade across the Catalan capital.
From Abuja, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo presides over an extraordinary Federal Executive Council meeting. Council kicks against the proposed 5-year compulsory service for medical doctors.
And in international news from London, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he wants to create a coalition of jets after talks with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
As Nigerians await the inauguration of the new administration on the 29th of May, the Inspector General of Police, Usman Alkali Baba, has read the Riot Act to political actors as well as their collaborators and anyone plotting to disrupt the presidential inauguration ceremony to stop heating up the polity. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, Mr. Alkali Baba says some major political actors who are not happy with the outcome of the just concluded elections are issuing public threats that are directed at instigating actions to frustrate the May 29th inauguration ceremony.
The Nigeria police hereby sternly warn all political actors with subversive agenda and their collaborators to particularly their foot soldiers, who they are exposing to political radicalization and extremism, to henceforth jettison their ongoing premeditated attempt to create tension within the national space with the intention to derail the May 29, 2023 presidential inauguration ceremony. Secondly, such persons, regardless of their political affiliation, who continuously engages in acts that are inimical to our nation's democratic and security interests, should not be in doubt on the firm determination of the Nigeria police under my watch to closely collaborate with the law enforcement family and the intelligence community to defend our democracy, keep the internal security order stable, and optimally deploy our common unique assets towards guaranteeing the successful conduct of the presidential inauguration ceremony. Thirdly, we note that the inauguration ceremonies at all the national and state levels of government are a critical constitutional requirement for the sustenance of our political order as a nation, and the Nigeria police is duty and legally bound to defend our democratic heritage and closely police the constitutional processes. Consequently, I assure the citizens that our loyalty to our democratic and political order remains firm and unwavering. We will defend our democracy at all costs. The 29th May 2023 date for the swearing-in ceremony of the President-elect of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and indeed other inauguration ceremonies at national and state level, is sacrosanct.
Well, still on the May 29 inauguration, an Abuja High Court presided over by Justice Inyang Ekwo has fixed the 18th of May 2023 to hear the suit filed by 5 residents of the Federal Capital Territory seeking to stop the inauguration of Senator Bola Tinubu as the next president of Nigeria. At the resumed hearing of the suit, Justice Ekwo adjourned the matter to the 18th of May to enable the counsel to the plaintiffs address the court on the issue of locus jurisdiction and whether the matter is not already before the Presidential Election Petition Court. Lawyer to the plaintiffs, Mr. Chuks Nwachuku, explained that the issues have been addressed in the originating summons and will be reopened at the next adjourned date. The plaintiffs approached the Federal High Court in Abuja on the 28th of April, claiming that Senator Tinubu failed to secure at least 25% of votes cast in the FCT and cannot be sworn in on that account.
We brought an application to refer our matter directly to the Court of Appeal. So the learned judge said that we need to satisfy him on some issues before he would rule whether to make the reference or not. So he talked about issues of local standard jurisdiction and whether or not the matter is already before the presidential election tribunal, petition tribunal. So those are the three issues he said we should satisfy him on. We have addressed those issues in our originating summons, but then he explained that he was yet to look at the summons.
Well, staying with the court, a federal high court sitting in Abuja has issued an order of interim injunction restraining the National Youth Service Corps, NYSC, from publishing or continuing to publish any disclaimer to the effect that the NYSC certificate obtained by the Governor-elect of Enugu State, Mr. Peter Mba, was not issued by the Corps. The matter, which was before Justice Inyang Ekwo, granted the order restraining the NYSC pending the hearing and determination of the motion on notice for interlocutory injunction filed by Mr. Peter Mba against the NYSC and the Director, Corps Certification, Mr. Ibrahim Mohammed.
The originating process itself summarily is complaining about our learned colleague, Barrister Peter Mba, is complaining over the disclaimer of his NYSC certificate, number A808297, that it was not issued to him, and this fact is untrue. So he has approached the court asking for 20 billion damages for conspiracy and fraudulent misrepresentation of fact. He also felt that from the processes we filed, we have all his documentations during and after his NYSC. So what we have done now is that the court granted the first prayer in the interim injunction and the request and deferred the second prayer to the 22nd of May.
With just about 2 weeks to the end of the 8-year tenure of the Buhari administration, it's now time to appraise the government in different sectors. Tonight, we begin a series of assessment on activities of the Buhari government in the last years, and we begin with politics. Our political correspondent, Seun Kuti, gives us a sneak peek into the political activities of the last 8 years.
It feels like yesterday, isn't it, when President Muhammadu Buhari was sworn in as the Commander-in-Chief and President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria right here at the Eagle Square. And now we are here 8 years down the line appraising and assessing what has happened in politics under this government in the last 8 years. I will make attempt, although difficult, to chronicle what has happened in these years.
So help me God.
It was a government we took off with a lot of support, enthusiasm and trust that the change which it promised would be delivered. Muhammadu Buhari, who had run 3 unsuccessful times to be president of Nigeria, and now for the 4th time achieving his aim, and on his inaugural speech, he sounded the alarm.
I belong to everybody, and I belong to nobody.
That quickly sent jitters across the land. Many think it will be game as usual. Mr. No Nonsense is now in charge. It was not long before Nigerians became impatient, and rightly so. The new president still has not snapped out of honeymoon, 5 months and no cabinet.
It took him almost 6 months to nominate his ministerial, bring his ministerial list to the National Assembly. And it was not the first list, the second list came up. Taking up on that score, one now feels that he has more or less a reluctant approach rather than the expected proactive political approach to mobilize and to move forward.
The president has been labeled as one who likes to take his time and was later tagged Baba Go Slow by some of his critics. The president was slowed down by his health. He fell ill and spent considerable number of months receiving treatment abroad. His posture towards party issues were largely criticized. In the space of 8 years, 4 persons had led the party, the All Progressives Congress APC, 3 as substantive national chairman, and 1 in caretaker capacity. Then I asked analysts to rate Buhari in some of the focus areas.
The national leadership in terms of politics has also been extremely poor. It was never clear what the political priorities are. There were major issues of national unity that were not addressed, but were in fact worsened by specific actions or lack of actions taken by the president that showed he didn't respect political balance in the country. I'll therefore rate his political leadership low.
I had my verdict on APC administration and the Buhari administration that I said that it is, and I still maintain that a positive check that bounced. So my rating of verdict is still on a low point.
President Buhari will be remembered for signing some major laws. The Not Too Young to Run bill, which reduced the age to run for political office, allowing younger people to seek public office. The Electoral Law 2022 expected to be more technology-friendly. The Petroleum Industry Bill, and several aspects of the constitutional amendment.
If we are to measure Buhari administration, having had 5 amendments plus this, now we have 21 within 8 years. It is as if the Constitutional Review Committee has become a standing committee in the National Assembly. So these are not, by every estimation, encouraging.
The Nigerian political calendar was then altered, changing May 29 to a mere Inauguration Day, elevating June 12 as Nigeria's Democracy Day, acknowledging the June 12 election of 1993, adjudged as perhaps the freest and fairest in our history.
I think it was appropriate, but I wouldn't rate that as a big political achievement, because in any case that's more of a symbolic than a real gesture. So I rate him high on that.
It's a magnanimous move in the sense that he now believes that Nigerians actually had their most transparent election, and in the course of that, he did what? He now moved to June 12 to keep in line with history. Medium.
Political history will document rightly or wrongly the handling of President Buhari on the issues of end-SARS protests by young Nigerians in many parts of the country. The El Zazaki and Shiite group, the sit-at-home and IPOB unrest in the southeast, the Oduduwa Republic agitation and the Sondo Igbo scenario in the southwest. Promises of fixing the economy and ensuring security, fighting corruption will be something to appraise by many based on the promises of the Buhari administration.
He had said he was coming in to address the question of insecurity. After 8 years, insecurity is much worse than he found it 8 years ago. So he has failed on that score.
8 years is a long time in the life of a nation. The politics of it is as crucial, but history will reward those who have genuinely contributed, not selfishly though, but in the interest of the nation. Seun Kuti reporting for Channels Television News.
So quite lots to talk about. In part two, after the break, we get more insight into how the Buhari administration fared with respect to politics in the last 8 years. And joining us to dissect the subject is a professor of political science at the Nasarawa State University, Professor Jideofor Adibe. We have that and more in a moment. Do stay with us. Welcome back. If this has joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live from Channels Television. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Make no mistake, the presidential inauguration will hold as scheduled. Inspector General of Police insists, warns detractors to stop heating up the polity. Son of Afrobeat legend Seun Kuti now in police custody after turning himself in following an altercation between the singer and a police officer a few days ago. 2 weeks to the end of his tenure, we take a dive into the last 8 years of President Buhari's administration, starting tonight with politics. And in 2 weeks, Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan will go head-to-head with his opposition rival in a runoff vote to decide who leads the country. Joining us right now on the news at 10 is a professor of political science at the Nasarawa State University, Professor Jideofor Adibe, to look at politics in the last 8 years under President Muhammadu Buhari. Welcome to the news at 10. Professor, although President Buhari had contested for 3 times before eventually winning in 2015. There are those who say the president is not a typical politician. How would you assess him, in terms of his handling of politics, policy, and governance in the past years?
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much. I don't know what it means to be a typical politician. Somebody who ran consistently for office over 12 years, you cannot say the person is not a typical politician. Yes, he came in as with a military background, but he was still a politician. He came as an austere man, and with the kind of image he caught during his first coming as a military president. People were expecting something very different. People were expecting, somebody who would take the fight to insurgents, to the Boko Haram. And people were expecting to see somebody who would do something differently, especially given the kind of, mass support, cult followership he had, especially in the northern part of the country.
In terms of what some would say are some of the omissions you think the president committed, and that would also be speaking politically. What are those omissions for you that may have shaped some of the decisions and policies of his administration?
Well, the first for me is complete mismanagement of the herdsmen crisis. Because he treated them with kid gloves. What then happened that you had non-state actors like Nnamdi Kanu and Sunday Igboho moving in to promise people, that they will protect them from the onslaught of the herdsmen. And then, as you know, when you empower non-state actors, it doesn't always go well. Because first they will take the violence to certain targets, and then they will turn the violence eventually to the populace. So I think that was a major failure on his part. The second one is that also he completely mismanaged the country's diversity. In the beginning, when he was talking about 97.5%, never mind that he doesn't add 100% and then dot on a circle, and overtly favored Muslim people from Muslim North in appointments. Some people have argued that it might be deliberate because a substratum of his support base were, those who believed that he was coming to bring back the assumed lost glory of the North. So each time he was accused of nepotism, of favoring a particular group, such accusations tends to valorize that base. So I think he didn't go very well. But as time went on, I think he got better in terms of, you know, favoring a particular group in the country. So in terms of what he did right in governance circles, I think also he was able to use personal diplomacy to get a number of choice positions in very prominent institutions for Nigerians. If you look at Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala at WTO, Amina Mohammed as Deputy Secretary of the UN, Dr. Oke Rama in Afrexim Bank, Dr. Adeshina in African Development Bank, and so on and so forth. I think he did his best there. He was also able to, you know, manage the passage of a number of important bills like the 2022 Electoral Amendment Act. I wished he was an empathic leader. He was emotionally distant from Nigerians. And there were several centers of power in his government, and they all seem to be working at cross purposes. I would also like to say that nobody can be in office for 8 years without recording some successes or major disappointments, even by the law of unintended consequences.
The president famously said during his swearing in 8 years ago that he is for nobody and for everybody. How well would you say, you know, he's justified that statement? Well, people don't really know what that means because some people have accused him of plagiarizing that from Charles de Gaulle's speech. But the general assumption was that he meant that, well, even he was supposed to be there for everyone. But we do know, as I said earlier, that, you know, there were people he regarded as a dot in a circle. And, you know, sometimes, yes, he built the second Niger bridge, for which people will always remember him in the southeast. But at least for now, people tend to relate more to people, not just by what they get from you, but how they feel you treated them. It is in that realm of feelings towards him, because he was emotionally distant from so many Nigerians. That feeling towards him, this inability to show empathy. For example, if there is a natural disaster, you expect to see a president on the spot, you know, giving support, emotional support and condolences. Because he was not that type of a person, he was emotionally distant, whereas on a whim, he will fly out. People tend to, you know, not really relate to him the way, you know, they will relate with others. Another thing is the kind of people he assembled in his, you know, communication team. Adeshina and Garuba Shehu are my friends, but they were very cantankerous in the manner they tried to relate to the opposition. And they created this simplistic binary of those who they call the wellers, that is, those opposed to the Buhari government, and those they thought were supporting him. And one of the consequences is that when you pigeonhole people like that and you try to define them in a certain way, they push back, such that if you say never, they will also intensify their own nevertheless. So quite a mixed bag there. We'd like to thank you, Professor Jideofor Adibe, for joining us. Your thoughts and insights on the news at 10 tonight.
Right, thank you very much.
Well, let's take you talking electoral matters now. The United States says it has taken steps to impose visa restrictions on specific individuals in Nigeria who disrupted the recently concluded elections. The U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, announced the development via a statement today. He clarified that the sanctions were specific to certain individuals and not the Nigerian people or the government as a whole. In his words, "Today I'm announcing that we have taken steps to impose visa restrictions on specific individuals in Nigeria for undermining the democratic process during Nigeria's 2023 election cycle." He adds that the United States is committed to supporting and advancing democracy in Nigeria and around the world, saying that the affected persons had been involved in voter threats, result manipulation, physical violence, as well as other activities that undermine democracy. However, the U.S. government did not mention any of the individuals or groups of persons perceived to have undermined Nigeria's 2023 polls. Still ahead on the news at 10. Nigerian chef Hilda Effiong Bassi, popularly known as Hilda Bassi, breaks the world record for the longest cooking time by an individual with a new time of 100 hours and 40 minutes. We have that still to come. And 3 days after a viral video showing Afrobeat star Seun Kuti slapping a policeman, the singer is now cooling his heels in police custody. Seun, son of Afrobeat legend Fela Anikulapo Kuti, turned himself in today at the police headquarters in Ikeja, where he was taken to the State Criminal Investigations Department, Panti Yaba, Lagos. The State Police Public Relations Officer, Benjamin Hundain, explains that investigation is still ongoing and if concluded, Seun will have his day in court. Otherwise, he will remain with the police until investigations are concluded. The Nigerian constitution permits the police to detain a suspect for 48 hours. The viral video had shown Seun engaged in an altercation with a police officer days ago, necessitating an order for his arrest by the Inspector General of Police, Usman Al-Kali-Baba, and speedy investigation of the assault. We're now off to our Abuja studios for more stories. Linda Kibe is waiting. Hi, Linda.
Hello, Millicent. Moving to governance issues. The federal government says it is not in support of the National Assembly's bill proposing to deny Nigeria-trained medical or dental practitioners from being granted full licenses until they have worked for a minimum of 5 years in the country. Briefing State House correspondents today after the Federal Executive Council meeting chaired by Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo. The Minister of Labour, Mr. Chris Ngige, asserted that the bill in the National Assembly cannot stop anyone from getting a full license. Our State House correspondent Gloria Umezuke reports.
Cabinet ministers converge on the council chamber for an extraordinary Federal Executive Council meeting, the second in May, presided over by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. The ministers for over 7 hours mulled over 40 memos, apparently in order to conclude before month end. Among the approvals are the Employee Compensation Act universal implementation announced by the Labour Minister. The Labour Minister then expressed the government's opposition to the bill seeking 5-year compulsory service for medical doctors.
The bill in the National Assembly cannot go to stop anybody from getting a full license. That's number one. That document is, as far as I'm concerned, not workable. Ab initio. I don't support it, and I will never support it. Like I said before, it's like clean a fly with a sledgehammer. They should think of other ways. If they are trying to check brain drain, there is other ways. If a doctor has read on scholarship, you bond him. 50,000 naira a session to a medical student is nothing. When their counterparts overseas pay 70,000 pounds for a session. So I don't support that bill. So you can bond them.
Again, Dr. Ngige described as unnecessary the planned 5-day warning strike by the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors over an increment in salaries, explaining that engagements with relevant government agencies are already underway. The tertiary education sector equally gets a boost as approval is given for more universities, upscaling the total number in the country to 259.
I said that my memo is for the establishment and licensing of 37 private universities. Something of interest, one of the universities is an online university by a woman from my state, Bauchi.
The council also approved the sum of 14 billion naira for the engagement of 4 federal agencies for the training of non-graduate N-Power beneficiaries. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
The Director General of the World Trade Organization, Mrs. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, is asking state governors to seek alternative revenue sources by diversifying their economy and building trust so that it would encourage interstate investments that would shore up states' revenue base. Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala was one of the guest speakers at the induction ceremony for newly elected and re-elected governors organized by the Nigeria Governors Forum in Abuja. Meanwhile, the Chief of Staff to President Buhari, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, is urging governors to deliver on their campaign promises or run the risk of being voted out of office in 2027.
The 2023 induction for re-elected and newly elected governors attracts dignitaries from different walks of life who converge on the banquet hall of the presidential villa in Abuja. It is an occasion that brings both the outgoing, re-elected and newly elected governors together to speak on the tasks ahead of these state executives.
I'm happy to note that democracy is alive and well, vibrant and thriving in Nigeria. With elections now over, it is time for us, all of us, to deliver the promises we made during the campaign. Any public officer who fails to either meet up with the expectations of the people or deliver on his campaign promises will be voted out in the next election.
Unemployment, poverty, and insecurity are difficult tasks incoming administration are expected to face in their respective states. Building strong, viable institutions in the polity will help in tackling unemployment, reducing poverty, and ensuring the provision of security of lives and property. This is a worthy legacy to be bequeathed to our children and generations to come.
Some of the guest speakers at the event also underscore the importance of nation building through strong partnerships and economic diversification.
We need to start preparing now for a time when our oil and gas may no longer serve us as the main sources of revenue. States with a heavy dependence on FAC allocations will be particularly hit. It is important that you, governors, start now to diversify your revenue sources. Honorable governors, let us be candid. Trust in Nigeria has always been fragile, but following the election, a lot of trust has been broken. Excellencies, you have a lot of healing to do.
Second, you will need trusted partnerships. Partnerships with central government, with the private sector, with civil society, academia, and with international financial institutions, and indeed with the United Nations, of which you are a big part.
The induction exercise is the first formal meeting of the newly elected, re-elected and outgoing governors from the 36 states of the Federation. It is expected that the knowledge shared at this meeting will have a significant impact on governance in their respective states.
That's all from Abuja. Now to Anne for business news.
Thank you, Millicent. Hello and welcome to Business News. Let's begin with Nigeria's headline inflation rate. According to economists' forecast, the rate has climbed further to 22.22% in the month of April, and that's the highest level in 18 years. According to the latest report released by the National Bureau of Statistics, the figure, which is the fourth consecutive month rise, is 0.18% higher than the 22.04% inflation rate, which was recorded in the month of March. Further analysis of the NBS report shows that core inflation climbed to 20.14%, food inflation rose to 24.61%, urban inflation was higher at 23.39%, while rural inflation climbed to 21.14% last month. The latest uptrend is largely attributed to surging cost of basic food prices, as well as non-alcoholic beverages, housing, water, electricity, gas, and fuel and other things across the country. Meanwhile, all eyes are now on the Central Bank of Nigeria's monetary policy, which will hold its third rates decision meeting as inflationary pressure continues to defy its series of rate hikes. The Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele is expressing concern about the recent challenges encountered by Nigerians in using the unstructured supplementary service data platform, also known as USSD code. The code allows users without smartphones or internet connections to access mobile banking. The governor, who is speaking at the launch of an e-learning platform by the bank as part of its financial literacy efforts in Abuja, explains that efforts have been put in place to address this challenge. Let's head to the domestic market now. It opened the first trading session in the week fairly positive today. Laddie Williams has the details.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Let's take a look at how your money performed today. Well, it looks like the local bourse is kicking off the week in positive territory, though not convincing. And I say not convincing. It's a marginal 0.03%, but it's positive. We'll take that. 52,231 points for the all-share index. Market cap still far from that 29 trillion level, but it's 28.440 trillion. That's what we have today. Let's look at the activity chart. We see it's all red compared to the last Friday. Volume 626 million units of stocks, valued at 5.59 billion, much less than we had last Friday. But we'll see more deals today, 6,033 deals. Let's look at the sectoral performance. We see oil and gas unchanged. Banking down marginally by 0.02%. We see GTCO there lost about 15 kobo. FBNH also lost in the share price, and that's what we see that counted down 0.02%. But consumer goods on the flip side, that's up 0.03%. First trading day of the third week of May, positive open, not convincing though, 0.03% advance, but we did get that inflation data for April, 22.22% higher than what we had in March. We'll see how that impacts the decision of the next MPC meeting, maybe more tightening. Now, that's a stock market report. I'm Ladi Williams. It's back to you, Anne.
Thank you, Ladi. We're hopeful for the week. The Court of Appeal in Abuja has suspended the enforcement of interim court orders against Seplat Energy PLC and its executives. The interim orders granted on May the 11th by the Federal High Court had been made after a petition was filed by minority shareholders restraining the chairman, the chief executive officer, the chief operating officer, and the company secretary from functioning as officers of the group. The petition was the third in a series of duplicative petitions filed by the same group of shareholders between the month of March and the month of April. Meanwhile, the appeal court has adjourned the matter to May the 30th for hearing of the motion on notice. Thanks for watching Business News Tonight. I'm Anne Mwawadu. The rest of News at 10 continues now with Millicent.
Thanks, Anne. Coming up on the news at 10, Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan will go head-to-head with his opposition rival in a runoff vote to decide who leads the country. That and other international stories coming up next from our London studios. Join us again. And Nigerian chef Hilda Effiong Bassi, popularly known as Hilda Bassi with a C, has broken the Guinness World Record for longest cooking time by an individual with a new time of 100 hours and 40 minutes. She's no stranger to breaking records as she won the maiden edition of the Jollof Face-Off competition held back in August 2021. She was allowed one assistant at a time and can take a 5-minute break each hour, or the equivalent over several hours. She indeed has broken the record set earlier in 2019 by Indian chef Lata Tondon, who completed the task in 87 hours and 45 minutes. Well, to some foreign news now. The head of Turkey's High Election Board has confirmed that the presidential election will go to a runoff. Simon Pusey has more on this and other stories and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky says he wants to create a coalition of jets after talks with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
We want to create this jets coalition.
Mr. Sunak hosted Zelensky at Chequers, his official country residence, with the pair discussing military aid ahead of an expected Ukrainian counter-offensive. For months, Zelensky has been asking Western countries to supply Ukraine with modern combat jets ahead of that much-anticipated counter-offensive. Mr. Sunak did not commit to sending planes, but said the UK can play a big part, including the previously announced training of Ukrainian fighter pilots.
We are going to be a key part of the coalition of countries that provides that support to
Vladimir and Ukraine. Now, it is not a straightforward thing, as Vladimir and I have been discussing, to build up that fighter combat aircraft capability. It's not just the provision of planes, it's also the training of pilots and all the logistics that go alongside that. Now, the UK can play a big part of that. One thing we will be doing, starting actually relatively soon, is training of Ukrainian pilots, and that's something that we've discussed today. We're ready to implement those plans in relatively short order, which will mean that we're training Ukrainian citizens to become absolutely combat-ready aircraft pilots.
Turkey's battle for the presidency looks almost certain to go to a runoff, with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan set for a 4-point lead in the first round. After 20 years in power, he stood on the balcony of his party HQ, saying he was convinced he would win 5 more. Opposition challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu also claimed to have victory in his grasp. Everything appeared to have fallen into place for first-round success, but incomplete results give him around 45%, with Mr. Erdogan on more than 49% of the vote. Candidates need more than 50% to win in the first round. Thai voters have delivered a stunning verdict in favour of an opposition party that is calling for radical reform of the country's institutions. Early results show Move Forward exceeding every prediction to win 151 of the 500 seats in the lower house. It's now 10 seats ahead of what was the front-runner, Pheu Thai, led by ex-Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatра's daughter. Analysts are calling this a political earthquake that represents a significant shift in public opinion. Kenyan government agencies should have been able to prevent the deaths by starvation of more than 200 members of a cult in the country's coastal region. That's according to the country's president. Authorities accuse Paul Mackenzie, leader of the Good News International Church, of ordering his followers to starve themselves and their children to death so they could go to heaven before the end of the world. The death toll so far stands at 201, making it one of the worst cult-related disasters in recent history. President William Ruto said he took responsibility for the disaster. Myanmar's military leaders have declared Rakhine State a natural disaster area after Cyclone Mocha hit, killing at least 6 people. The cyclone is one of the strongest this century to hit the Bay of Bengal, lashing Myanmar and Bangladesh. The Category 5 storm pummeled Myanmar's coast, destroying hundreds of homes and shelters. The company behind the websites Vice and Motherboard has filed for bankruptcy in the US and is set to be sold to a group of its lenders. Vice Media Group, which was valued at $5.7 billion in 2017, could be taken over for $225 million. The youth-focused digital publisher said it will continue to operate during the bankruptcy process. It added that it expects to emerge as a financially healthy and stronger company in 2 to 3 months. And a US researcher has broken the world record for the longest time spent living underwater without depressurization. Joseph Dituri has spent more than 74 days at the bottom of a 30-foot deep lagoon in Key Largo in Florida. And he does not have plans to stop anytime soon. On Sunday, he said he would stay in Jules's undersea lodge for at least 100 days. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel's studios in Lagos.
Thanks, Simon. And just before we bring you sports news, members-elect of the Minority Caucus of the 10th Assembly, they've rescinded their earlier decision to present candidates for the position of Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives. This was made known by one of the spokesmen of the caucus, Afam Ogene, after a closed-door meeting in Abuja. According to him, the lawmakers resolved to support the candidacy of Tajuddin Abbas and Right Honourable Benjamin Kalu for Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives. The group is calling on other members-elect of the 10th Assembly of the House of Representatives to join in the election of Right Honourable Tajuddin Abbas and Benjamin Kalu as Speaker and Deputy Speaker on the 13th of June 2023.
It's now time for sports. Sound of joy in the Catalan capital as Barcelona celebrate the success of the men's and women's football teams with a parade across the city. The players toured on an open bus while partying and waving at fans traveling for almost 7 kilometers in 3 hours. Barcelona men's team won the first La Liga title in 4 years on Sunday, while the women's team wrapped up their 4th consecutive league title on April the 30th. Now, a similar mood is witnessed outside Rotterdam City Hall, where thousands of Feyenoord fans packed the square to celebrate their team's first Dutch Football League title in 6 years. The fans, including school children who were not sitting for exams, took to their places hours before the team appeared at the balcony after receiving official congratulations from the city's mayor. And that's it on Sports News. Thank you for watching. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. Back to Millicent for the rest of News at 10.
Thanks, Jeffrey. And the main news again. We told you that the Inspector General of Police insisted today that the presidential inauguration will hold as scheduled, as he warned anyone planning to foment trouble to have a rethink. That's news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Have a good night and stay safe.